Anybody remember the 3 ways that we can quickly turn the machine off or turn the lathe off? Give me one, Christopher.
Foot pedal.
Yeah, foot pedal. So if I turn this on, foot pedal. Again, that's emergency use only. Okay. Second way. E-stop. Yes, so if I got my machine, E-stop. Now you can see the deceleration isn't as quick as if you use that foot pedal. So how do I get power back on the lathe?
You gotta press the power button first, and then you gotta wait till the light.
How come I got no power?
Because maybe the
Thanks, Richard. E-stop's on. So turn it to the right to release it. Now I can provide power to the machine. Okay? Everybody good so far? So when I take this handle and I put it in a down position, should I be cutting my material? No, what's going to happen to my insert? It's going to chip or break and I'm going to be upset with you. Okay, so this handle, now we're going up. Okay, always goes up. Any questions so far? So obviously, your clothing or attire is very important. As I look around the class, I see a number of students that would not be allowed to run the lathe right now. Okay, we talked about loose clothing, jewelry, and the long hair is going to have to get tied back. You might be the only one, Richuti. Not long enough to tie back? We'll figure that out. Maybe not, maybe not. Anyway, so you just want to make sure you respect the equipment. Bad things can happen when you don't respect the equipment. So, getting back to the main parts of the lathe. There's 3 main parts. Hold on. There we go. The first one is what we call the headstock. Okay, so a lot of times machine components are related sometimes to your body parts. We learn on the milling machine about the knee or the head of the milling machine. Same thing applies on the lathe. The headstock. That's this unit right here. Anybody know what this headstock is responsible for? Okay, Chris.
Controlling everything.
No, not really.
You know,
It has specific tasks. It does have a lot of handles on it and unknown things. First item that this contains all the gears and bearings that the machine uses to rotate at a selected RPM rate. Okay, so if I took this cover plate off by taking these 6 bolts, taking it up, it's going to expose all of the bearings and gears inside. Okay, and they provide the driving force for your spindle. So your spindle literally runs through the entire headstock of your machine. If I take my outside guard off here, you'll be able to see some of the drive belts and pulleys on the machine. Okay, and this spindle right here runs through the entire headstock and is connected to that chuck. So you never want to operate this machine without the guard in place. The nice thing about this machine, it's got a safety interlock switch. So if the guard's not in place, we can't put power to the machine. So we'll slap this guard back on. Okay, so also on the headstock, it provides support for your primary work holding device, which is called our chuck. Again, I can take this chuck off and mount a face plate to the spindle and a number of other work holding devices. But generally a 3-jaw chuck is your most common work holding device on a lathe. The nice thing about these 3 jaws, when you tighten and loosen the bolts, they move together on a scroll plate. Okay, so it's just like when using a drill chuck on the drill press or on the milling machine. The three jaws move together to secure around your piece of round stock. Okay, this lathe is actually very versatile. I could put on a 4-jaw chuck and machine rectangular pieces of steel. Okay, so it's very, very, very versatile. Okay, so this is basically what we call our headstock. Biggest thing that you guys need to know is the difference between high range and low range and understanding these numbers. When you start machining your aluminum, it's a 1-inch diameter aluminum. When you end face and parallel turn, you're going to be spinning it at about 1,000 RPM. So this handle is in high range. If I take it and switch it to low range, 325 RPM. Okay, so a significant difference. Did you guys notice when I tried to move this handle, it wouldn't fully go into gear at first? If that happens to you when you're running the lathe, sometimes it's beneficial to put your right hand on the chuck, left hand on the lever, and rotate the chuck so that the gears mesh. Okay, right now this won't go back in the low range, but if I take this chuck and turn it at the same time, the gears are going to mesh so that they engage, and you won't be grinding my gears when you turn the lathe on. Okay? So, maybe I want to turn the RPM rate up. When I take that handle and I switch it to the left, I have an additional 2 options. Right now I'm in low range. So if I turn this machine on, how fast is it going to be spinning? Okay, Chris?
700 RPM.
700 RPM. How come my machine won't turn on? I got no power. How come I don't have power? My machine compressor on later. How come we got no power? What did I do that tripped the power off?
Press the key stop and never turn the power back on.
Nope. Yeah, I took the guard off. Killed power to the machine. So now I have to re-engage the machine. Power. So turning this on, 725 RPM. If I take my handle and go from low to high, how fast is it going to spin? Come on to
2,000 RPM.
2,000. That thing's flying. Okay? That's about the max we can spin this thing. Generally, you probably won't find any operations that we're going to perform on this machine that you'll need 2,000 RPMs. Maybe sanding and buffing, but likely not going to happen. Okay? So, you adjust the speed according to the material that you're going to machine. But generally 1,000 RPM is what you're going to use for end facing and parallel turning your aluminum. Okay? Any questions so far? So these bottom handles control your feed rates. So this machine feeds both in this direction and this way. So whenever a machine can have automatic feeds, or you have the ability to use automatic feeds, it's recommended because it helps improve your surface finish and it prolongs the life of your cutter. So if I have my machine set up properly and I turn this on, and I take my feed lever handle and I put it down, you can see this handle moving towards the chuck. Okay, and as we'll learn in a few minutes, this is our carriage. It houses our cutting tool. It's moving automatically towards the chuck. And we use this when we parallel turn our workpiece. If I wanted to change the direction of my feed, I disengage the feed handle and I take this plunge lever and push it in. And you want to make sure it goes all the way in. Right now I know that's not all the way in. So if I gauge my feed handle, sometimes it doesn't pop into gear. But you can see that this handle is now moving. It's feeding my cutter this way on my lathe. So we use that when we're end facing our workpiece. So these handles down here control how fast that feed rate moves. Okay? Maybe your feed rate's too slow for the material we're cutting. We have to make some adjustments to these handles. Okay? Any questions so far? So that's the headstock. Very important component of the lathe. The next main part of the lathe. If you remember, there's 3 of them. This is what we call our carriage. So this hand lever controls the manual movement of our carriage. Okay, it rides along the ways of our lathe. Okay, everybody understand that so far? Okay. This handle controls the movement of our cross slide. Okay, so it's moving across the lathe. So mounted to our cross slide is what we call our compound rest. Okay, this mechanism. Mounted to our compound rest is our tool post. Okay, mounted in our tool post is a carbide cutter. At our old school, we used high-speed steel cutters, and we had to manually set the proper height value. Okay, these 4 machines, we've already gone through and set the height of our carbide cutter. So again, at your carriage, cross slide, compound rest, tool post, and your actual tool holder. Okay? So as we learned earlier, this is your feed handle. It controls the direction of your feed. So right now I'm feeding my cross slide that way. I can take this, pull it out, and it's now moving my carriage towards the chuck. This handle's what we call our split nut lever. It's used in conjunction with this dial for external threading. You guys won't do any external threading until you're probably in grade 12 in this class. Okay? So don't worry about these 2 handles. Any questions so far? So again, your carriage, very important component on the lathe. When we clean our lathe, I often recommend to students that they return the carriage as far to the right as possible so that we can clear the chips down into our chip pan and clear the chips off of our ways, getting down into the chip pan. So that leads us into our 3rd and final part of the lathe. Anybody know what this is called? It's up on the screen. Sorry, I'm just moving the carriage. Nope. Any ideas? So it's on the end of your lathe, and the name of it, tailstock. Okay? So just to review, we got our headstock, our carriage, and now our tailstock. Anybody know what we would use this tailstock for? Chris?
Think you would use a tail track for?
Nice try. Yep.
It would be used to get the birds out of
Not really. The tailstock's actually used for performing, the majority of the time, drilling operations into the end of your workpiece. So right now I have mounted in this spindle what we call a live center. And they call it a live center because the tip of it rotates. We use the live center to support the end of a long cylindrical piece when we're parallel turning. But I can pop this live center off very quickly. And I want to make sure that my spindle lock is loose so that I can turn this handle so it returns the spindle and the tool pops out of the spindle. Then I can turn the handle back out and put my next tool in. And oftentimes on the lathe, to do your drilling, we stick a drill chuck in there. I forget which drawer they're in. Oh, the 4th drawer. So, chuck. And now we put into our spindle. And we can perform some drilling operations into the end of our workpiece. So this spindle only has about 5 inches of travel. There's a graduated collar on this spindle, so you can control the depth of your drilling. You never want to turn this spindle out past that 5-inch mark. Okay, so always be aware or cognizant of that. You never turn this handle if this lock mechanism is engaged. There's another secondary lock, and that's for positioning it in a certain position on the ways of your lathe. So if I had to drill a hole in the end of my workpiece, I would slide this tailstock until my chuck is roughly an inch or two away from my workpiece. And then so that this tailstock doesn't move anymore, I take this lock handle and put it up. So now I can't move the tailstock, but I can turn my spindle. So I would mount my cutting tool or drill or whatever I'm doing in the end of my workpiece into the chuck and perform the drilling operation with the spindle running. Okay, you guys understand that? Do me a favor, don't turn this handle if this lock is up, because then you're going to cause damage to this spindle on the tailstock. Okay, it's got to be loose so that you can perform the drilling operation. The entire mechanism has to be locked in place so it doesn't move on you while you're doing the drilling. So when we clean our lathe, we loosen the tailstock and we pull it as far to the right as possible. So you got to be careful with this thing. We haven't set up our stop yet so that this thing doesn't fall off the tail or the end of your lathe. Okay, this is very heavy, and if it falls off our ways, we're going to cause damage to the tool and probably to your toes. So we just return it to the end of our lathe or our ways, and we return our carriage in order to do the proper cleaning of the lathe. Okay, so those are the main parts of the lathe in a nutshell. 3 main parts: headstock, carriage, tailstock. Okay, and they each have their own important tasks or functions that need to be performed. Okay. So tomorrow, we'll get into what we call lathe operations. Okay, and the 2 main ones are end facing and parallel turning. And when you guys start your lathe projects, one of the first things you're going to learn how to do is end face. Then we're going to learn how to parallel turn. Okay, so learning how to use a lathe is a very lengthy process. So each day from now until we start on the lathes, we're going to be going through some very important items. Okay, any questions on this? So tomorrow when I quiz you again at the beginning of class, you'll be able to list the 3 main parts of the lathe, how to change your speeds, how to change your feed direction, how to take a live center out and put a drill chuck in. Okay, so that's it for the lathe. My understanding you guys still have